Weatherproof paddle fan boxes are indeed available. These boxes are specifically designed for outdoor use and manufactured with materials resistant to rain, snow, and wind. The National Electrical Code (NEC) mandates that all electrical fittings used in outdoor environments must be UL approved for wet locations. In 2020, the UL listing for standard compression fittings used outdoors was discontinued and superseded by a new standard, UL 514. The UL-approved Raintite fittings for electrical metallic tubing, or EMT, are currently available from multiple manufacturers. These fittings are specifically engineered to comply with the new UL 514 D standard and are appropriate for application in wet locations. Sources for weatherproof paddle fan boxes include Home Depot, Lowe's, and Amazon. Sources for UL-approved Raintite fittings include Thomas & Betts Hubbell and Cooper B. Line. When installing a paddle fan box underneath a gazebo above a deck, several factors need to be considered. Firstly, water resistance is important. Confirm that the paddle fan box is suitable for wet locations and that all fittings are UL approved for outdoor use. Secondly, electrical wiring considerations should be made. Employ proper wiring techniques and securely fasten all connections utilizing wire nuts rated for outdoor applications. Thirdly, support must be considered. Guarantee the paddle fan box is securely mounted and can adequately support the fan's weight. Fourthly, ensure adequate access for any necessary future maintenance or repairs. To reiterate the importance of UL 514, it is crucial to understand its implications for electrical installations in wet locations. The previous UL listing for regular compression fittings was deemed insufficient to guarantee long-term performance and safety in such environments. The new standard, UL 514 D, introduces more rigorous testing and performance requirements to ensure that fittings can withstand exposure to moisture, corrosion, and other environmental factors. The fittings compliant with UL 514 D typically feature enhanced sealing mechanisms and corrosion-resistant materials to prevent water ingress and maintain electrical conductivity over time. When selecting Raintite fittings, it is essential to verify that they are explicitly listed as compliant with UL 514 D. Manufacturers often indicate compliance on the product packaging or in their product specifications. Relying on outdated fittings or those not specifically designed for wet locations can result in premature failure, electrical hazards, and code violations. Furthermore, it is crucial to ensure proper installation techniques when utilizing Raintite fittings. This involves tightening connections to the manufacturer's specified torque requirements, utilizing appropriate sealing compounds or tapes, and protecting fittings from physical damage during installation. Regular inspections and maintenance are also recommended to identify and address any signs of deterioration or water intrusion. When installing the paddle fan box, it is important to consider the specific requirements of the fan itself. Paddle fans can be heavy, and their dynamic movement can exert significant stress on the mounting structure. Therefore, the paddle fan box must be adequately rated to support the weight and movement of the fan. Boxes specifically designed for paddle fans typically feature reinforced construction and mounting hardware to ensure secure attachment to the building structure. It is also advisable to consult the fan manufacturer's instructions for specific recommendations on box type and installation procedures. In addition to the paddle fan box itself, the wiring connecting the fan to the electrical supply must be suitable for outdoor use. This typically involves using weatherproof wiring, such as Type UF cable, and protecting connections with weatherproof enclosures or fittings. All wiring connections must be made in accordance with the NEC and local electrical codes. When working with electrical systems in wet locations, safety is of paramount importance. Always disconnect power before working on any electrical components and use appropriate personal protective equipment such as rubber gloves and safety glasses. If you are not comfortable working with electrical systems, it is best to consult a qualified electrician. Regarding the gazebo structure itself, it is important to ensure that it is structurally sound and capable of supporting the weight of the paddle fan and the paddle fan box. The gazebo's framing members should be adequately sized and securely connected to the foundation or supporting structure. If there is any doubt about the gazebo's structural integrity, it is best to consult a qualified structural engineer. Another important consideration is the potential for wind loading on the paddle fan. Paddle fans can create significant drag in windy conditions, which can exert substantial forces on the mounting structure. To mitigate this risk, it may be necessary to install a wind-rated paddle fan or to provide additional bracing for the gazebo structure. It is also important to consider the potential for corrosion of electrical components in outdoor environments. Salt air, humidity, and other environmental factors can accelerate the corrosion of metal parts, which can lead to electrical failures and safety hazards. To minimize corrosion, it is advisable to use corrosion-resistant materials, such as stainless steel or aluminum, for all electrical components and hardware. Regular cleaning and maintenance can also help to prevent corrosion. Furthermore, it is beneficial to consider the aesthetics of the installation. Choose a paddle fan and paddle fan box that complements the style of the gazebo and surrounding area. Conceal wiring and other components as much as possible to create a clean and uncluttered appearance. Consider the placement of the paddle fan to optimize airflow and minimize obstructions. Ultimately, the goal is to create a safe, functional, and aesthetically pleasing outdoor living space. When addressing the specific scenario of installing a paddle fan under a gazebo on a second-story deck, several additional factors come into play. Firstly, the height of the deck above ground level necessitates careful consideration of fall protection measures during installation and maintenance. Secondly, the location of the deck may be subject to specific building codes and regulations, such as height restrictions, setback requirements, and structural load requirements. It is important to consult with local building officials to ensure compliance with all applicable codes and regulations. Thirdly, the exposure of the deck to wind and weather may be more severe at a higher elevation, which can further exacerbate the risks of corrosion and wind loading. This necessitates the use of more robust materials and construction techniques. Fourthly, the accessibility of the paddle fan for maintenance and repairs may be more challenging at a higher elevation, which may require the use of specialized equipment or personnel. When selecting a paddle fan for this application, it is important to choose a model that is specifically designed for outdoor use and that is rated for wet locations. The fan should also be equipped with a corrosion-resistant finish and sealed bearings to withstand exposure to the element. The fan blade should be made of a durable material such as aluminum or plastic that is resistant to warping and cracking. The fan motor should be energy efficient and quiet in operation. When installing the paddle fan box, it is important to ensure that it is securely attached to the gazebo structure and that it is properly sealed to prevent water intrusion. The box should be mounted flush with the underside of the gazebo roof and should be adequately supported by the framing members. The box should be equipped with a weatherproof cover to protect the wiring connections from the elements. When wiring the paddle fan, it is important to use weatherproof wiring and fittings and to follow all applicable electrical codes. The wiring should be run in conduit or other protective enclosure to prevent damage from abrasion or impact. The wiring connections should be made in a weatherproof junction box and should be properly grounded. When selecting a control switch for the paddle fan, it is important to choose a model that is rated for outdoor use and that is compatible with the fan's motor. The switch should be mounted in a weatherproof enclosure and should be easily accessible. Finally, it is important to test the installation thoroughly before putting the paddle fan into service. Check all wiring connections for tightness and proper polarity. Verify that the fan is running smoothly and quietly. Ensure that the fan blades are properly balanced and are not rubbing against any obstructions. Confirm that the fan is properly grounded. By following these guidelines, it is possible to install a paddle fan safely and effectively under a gazebo on a second-story deck, creating a comfortable and enjoyable outdoor living space. Remember, safety always comes first, and when in doubt, consult with a qualified electrician or structural engineer. For EMT fittings, proper selection and installation are crucial for ensuring a safe and reliable electrical system, especially in environments exposed to moisture. electrical metallic tubing, and provides a protective raceway for electrical conductors, and the fittings that connect the EMT to boxes, enclosures, and other components are essential for maintaining the integrity of the raceway system. When selecting EMT fittings for outdoor or wet locations, it's important to choose fittings that are specifically listed for those applications. These fittings are designed to prevent water from entering the raceway and causing corrosion or electrical faults. Raintite fittings are commonly used in these situations, as they provide a seal that prevents water from entering the fitting. Compression fittings are another option, but they must be listed as Raintite to be suitable for wet locations. The NEC requires that all electrical equipment and wiring be installed in accordance with its provisions, and this includes the selection and installation of EMT fittings. Section 314.15 of the NEC covers the requirements for boxes and fittings in damp or wet locations. This section specifies that boxes and fittings used in wet locations must be listed for use in wet locations. This means that the fittings must be tested and certified by a recognized testing laboratory such as UL to ensure that they meet the requirements for wet location use. When installing EMT fittings in wet locations, it's important to follow the manufacturer's instructions carefully. This includes properly tightening the fitting to ensure a watertight seal and using the correct tools for the job. It's also important to inspect the fittings regularly to ensure that they are in good condition and that there are no signs of corrosion or damage. In addition to selecting and installing the correct fittings, it's also important to consider the overall design of the electrical system. This includes ensuring that the system is properly grounded and that all components are compatible with each other. It's also important to protect the system from physical damage, such as from impact or abrasion. By following these guidelines, it's possible to install a safe and reliable electrical system using EMT and the appropriate fittings, even in wet or outdoor locations. When installing electrical systems in damp or wet locations, it's crucial to choose the right types of fittings to ensure safety and prevent electrical hazards. Damp locations are defined as areas that are subject to moderate degrees of moisture, such as some basements, barns, and cold storage warehouses. Wet locations, on the other hand, are areas that are subject to saturation with water or other liquids, such as car washes, unprotected locations outdoors, and underground installations. For damp locations, fittings that are identified as damp location fittings can be used. These fittings are designed to resist corrosion and prevent moisture from entering the electrical system. They typically have a gasket or O-ring that seals the fitting against the enclosure or box. For wet locations, fittings that are identified as wet location fittings must be used. These fittings are designed to withstand direct exposure to water and other liquids. They typically have a more robust construction than damp location fittings and are made from materials that are resistant to corrosion. There are several different types of wet location fittings available, including Raintite fittings, watertight fittings, and submersible fittings. Raintite fittings are designed to prevent rain from entering the electrical system. They typically have a gasket or O-ring that seals the fitting against the enclosure or box, as well as a hood or shroud that protects the fitting from direct exposure to rain. Watertight fittings are designed to prevent water from entering the electrical system, even when a fitting is submerged in water. They typically have a more robust construction than Raintite fittings and are made from materials that are resistant to corrosion. Submersible fittings are designed to be completely submerged in water. They are typically used in applications such as swimming pools, fountains, and underground installations. When selecting fittings for damp or wet locations, it's important to consider the specific conditions of the environment. For example, if the location is subject to extreme temperatures or corrosive chemicals, it may be necessary to use fittings that are made from special materials. It's also important to consider the size and type of conductors that will be used in the electrical system. The fittings must be sized appropriately for the conductors and must be compatible with the type of insulation used on the conductors. When installing fittings in damp or wet locations, it's important to follow the manufacturer's instructions carefully. This includes properly tightening the fittings to ensure a watertight seal and using the correct tools for the job. It's also important to inspect the fittings regularly to ensure that they are in good condition and that there are no signs of corrosion or damage. If any damage is found, the fitting should be replaced immediately. By following these guidelines, it's possible to install a safe and reliable electrical system in damp or wet locations. In addition to the UL 514, D standard for Raintite fittings, there are other relevant UL standards that apply to electrical equipment used in wet locations. These include UL 50, enclosures for electrical equipment, and UL 486-486b, wire connectors. UL 50 covers the requirements for enclosures used to house electrical equipment, including those used in wet locations. This standard specifies the types of materials, construction methods, and testing procedures required to ensure that enclosures can withstand exposure to moisture, corrosion, and other environmental factors. UL 486. -486. B covers the requirements for wire connectors used in electrical systems. The standard specifies the types of materials, construction methods, and testing procedures required to ensure that wire connectors can provide a reliable electrical connection, even in wet locations. When selecting electrical equipment for wet locations, it's important to choose products that are listed to the appropriate UL standards. This will help to ensure that the equipment is safe and reliable and that it will perform as expected in the intended environment. When installing electrical equipment in wet locations, it's important to follow all applicable codes and regulations. This includes the NEC, as well as any local codes or regulations that may apply. It's also important to follow the manufacturer's instructions carefully when installing electrical equipment. This will help to ensure that the equipment is installed correctly and that it will operate safely and reliably. Regular inspection and maintenance of electrical equipment in wet locations is essential for ensuring continued safety and reliability. This includes checking for signs of corrosion, damage, or water intrusion. Any damaged or corroded equipment should be repaired or replaced immediately. By following these guidelines, it's possible to install and maintain a safe and reliable electrical system in wet locations. In addition to the technical aspects of selecting and installing electrical equipment in wet locations, it's also important to consider the human factors. This includes providing adequate training for electricians and other personnel who will be working on the equipment. It also includes providing clear and concise instructions for operating and maintaining the equipment. By addressing the human factors, it's possible to further enhance the safety and reliability of electrical systems in wet locations. Another crucial aspect to consider is the grounding and bonding of electrical systems, particularly in outdoor and wet environments. Proper grounding and bonding are essential for minimizing the risk of electrical shock and ensuring the safe operation of electrical equipment. Grounding refers to the connection of electrical equipment and systems to the earth, providing a path for fault current to flow back to the source. This helps to trip circuit breakers or fuses, quickly disconnecting the power and preventing electrical hazards. Bonding, on the other hand, involves connecting different metallic parts of an electrical system together, creating a low impedance path for fault current. This helps to equalize the voltage potential between different parts of the system, reducing the risk of electrical shock. In wet locations, grounding and bonding are even more critical due to the increased conductivity of water. Water can provide a path for electrical current to flow through the human body, making electrical shock more likely and more severe. Therefore, it's essential to ensure that all electrical equipment and systems in wet locations are properly grounded and bonded. The NEC provides specific requirements for grounding and bonding in Article 250. These requirements vary depending on the type of electrical system and the location of the equipment. For example, the NEC requires that all outdoor electrical equipment be grounded, including lighting fixtures, receptacles, and appliances. The NEC also requires that all metallic parts of an electrical system be bonded together, including conduit, enclosures, and equipment frames. When installing grounding and bonding systems in wet locations, it's important to use corrosion-resistant materials such as copper or stainless steel. These materials will help to prevent corrosion and ensure that the grounding and bonding system remains effective over time. It's also important to protect grounding and bonding connections from physical damage, such as from impact or abrasion. This can be done by using conduit or other protective enclosures. Regular inspection and maintenance of grounding and bonding systems are essential for ensuring continued safety and reliability. This includes checking for signs of corrosion, damage, or loose connections. Any damaged or corroded equipment should be repaired or replaced immediately. It is also very important that a professional electrician performs regular testing of the entire electrical system, and they will be able to advise on anything that needs to be done to keep the system in top working order. By following these guidelines, it's possible to install and maintain a safe and reliable grounding and bonding system in wet locations.